Chapter 27. Usagi did not sleep alone. She curled up against Bao for warmth, her tail curled up around the rabbity human. I wondered when the last time the girl had that. Warmth and touch are vital for human health and well-being, particularly for the young. Frightened children were known to stay with their parents, fearful and longing for safety and protection only their caregiver could provide. Yet it seemed Usagi's people provided very little of that for orphans, which seemed at odds to me with what I had observed of the human capacity for care for the young in need. But a seed of an answer had come out in Usagi's description of life. It seemed that death is a very common thing for them, that loss is as routine as the sun, and as such they had become so case-hardened that all they could do was preserve those closest to them. All others were tertiary. It was a frighteningly Dlamacin sort of thought process, a cold, cruel logic. The more I thought about it, the more like us these humans seemed to be. Yet what did it mean for a young girl like Usagi? Growing up to see herself as expendable could not have been an easy thing. I doubt she had the kind of comfort she was now taking from Bao in quite some time. I lowered my ears to dim my hearing a little when I laid down. Fauve and her mother were whispering, and much as I wanted to know what they were saying, that they were whispering said well enough that it was private. I didn't have to hear, however, to know what it was in principle if not word for word. Rebecca was obviously hard hit by Usagi's words. Her motherly instincts gone into overdrive over the lost-eyed, hungry girl with little care left for her own life. But at the same time, it wasn't as if she could just take a rabbity girl with no education into the wider human world with no preparation either, even if Usagi didn't fear the very idea. At the very least, though, it magnified and brought into focus her affection for her own child to such a grand degree that I couldn't fathom the grim hopelessness of her darkest imaginings. Only quirks of birth and choices in the past kept her family from sharing the fate of those who once lived in Chicago. And when their voices stilled and the drone shut down, Rebecca took the machine and clutched its cold metal and plastic against her bosom, as if it were Fauve herself. Byron and Bosun did not remain awake for long. I could see them out of the corners of my eye. They lay still in the old beds, staring up at nothing until they slept. What they thought I do not know. They kept it to themselves. Bonnie Red was fiddling with her datapad, though what she was doing I didn't yet know, and from the way she stared at it, I doubt she would have said. So I didn't ask. Usagi slept with surprising ease, cuddled against my sister for shared warmth. Her evident indifference was let out against my sister's fur for a little while, and the gray ash she coated her hair with left stains of gray in my sister's dark and reddish fur. But Bao didn't seem to mind. I was the last to sleep. Fear about tomorrow crept over me that was equal to my desire to succeed. I'd succeeded before, and wanted to again. But exactly what even counted as success here? Reintegration? Feeding them? Medical treatment? The very objective, their rescue, was so nebulous that my very lack of direction set me on edge. Not knowing what to do, that was perhaps my greatest fear. Greater even than failing at whatever it was when it came time to do it. At least knowing what I needed to do, I could give it my best, and if I failed, I know I tried. But ignorance and indecision about what to do did not even let me make a proper choice. I had to trust in Bao, and that was not an easy thing to ask. I wanted to. I swear I did. But it was hard, and that kept me awake far later than it should have before I finally fell asleep. It was Usagi who woke us all up. We go. Usagi has checked the land. The wolves are gone. The big cats are gone. It is clear to the city. You follow me. If you have food, eat while we go while the wind is with us, she said, and hung her crowbar over her shoulder to clamber up the stone ladder and back to the surface. It was strange to take orders from a girl that age, but it's hard to argue with someone who knows what they're doing when you frankly do not. So we followed. I have to admit, I was impressed by the way this underfed girl could move after a full meal. I was, however, saddened that she didn't think to ask for food, just told us to eat. The drone powered on by the time we were 50 paces from the old inn, and Usagi led the way as we drew ever closer to the skyline. The farther we went from where we were, the worse the roads became, and the greater the evidence of destruction. What was truly eerie, though, was when we saw the outlines of humans against stone walls, like the worst form of flash photography, capturing the shape of a person who was taken completely by surprise. Their vaporized shape against the walls was the only indication of their many years of life, and they were erased from existence as if they'd never been. I wondered how many people were vaporized when the city died, and how many other cities shared its fate. We stopped briefly when we came to a sign where twisted metal and a big, half-melted green sign still hung in a half-bowed state, as if it had surrendered to its fate, but lived long enough to mark its own grave. Welcome to Chicago was barely visible any longer. If left alone, I doubt it would have lasted another century before it was just faded green, and then after that, worn away steel that would one day rust and return to the earth. There's a gathering place within. Follow, and at least some of the long steps should be here to meet you. Usagi promised, and follow her we did. Chapter 28. Let me say I have never seen ruins before, or rather, outside of pictures, and pictures do not do them justice. The wind blows through dead places, and you can feel the sense that once there was intelligent life there. Even centuries later, there are still things that break. Glass may shatter as it finally comes loose from its security, or something falls over that had been leaning quietly for ages. The twisted and melted metal of cars, all lined up in front of what were once street lights and stop signs, was a testament to how life here was once bustling. Now the remnants sat, still lined up on their way to nowhere. Tall buildings stretched out toward the sky, and Bao pointed toward one of them. They found me there. It wasn't the tallest of the ruins, but it was high enough that if she had started a fire, I had no doubt it was indeed going to be seen and draw curious eyes. Stay together, Usagi said. The rats here are big, and they do not fear any man or woman who stands alone. Stray, and you may find them coming for you in many numbers. They will avoid a group, though, so stay together. Stay safe. Is that why it was children that found you? I asked Bao, and she nodded. Usagi filled in the rest of the story. The young train by killing rats. They eat what they kill, so for the youngest of the young of hunting age, rats are the best choice. Still, some do not come home from their hunts. She didn't fill in the gap right away, but stupidly, I asked another question. Are they ever found? I looked around the vacant buildings, peering into the dark places where no light had visited in hundreds of years. Sometimes bones, sometimes only the spear. Sometimes we kill a great nest and find scraps of their cloth in the nest. Usagi has been lucky. Many rats I have killed. It is why Usagi lives at all. She said it with such nonchalance that I couldn't help but feel a deep well of sadness for her. Nor was I alone in that. Wolves dislike this place. They will come if they chase prey, but otherwise they do not. That sounds dangerous. Fove's voice crackled over the speaker. What does a matcha-ine know of danger? Usagi asked. I'm not a machine, I'm Fove, the human woman person's daughter, Fove protested. I'm just piloting this drone to record things that might help Bao to help you. Piloting? What does lots of pie have to do with matcha-ine? Does your matcha-ine make pies of rat meat and bread? I have none to give you, and we can do that ourselves, Usagi said. Her ears flopped over in her confusion, and Fove suppressed a laugh, or tried to. She was not fully successful. Usagi, you are very, very cute. No, piloting means I'm driving. I am making this matcha-ine move from somewhere else. I can see through it and hear through it and everything, Fove explained, and Usagi looked from it to Rebecca and back again. Are you gods? Usagi asked with a hushed whisper. No. I'm Fove, and I'd rather be friends than be a god, she replied. This is just something we know how to use and make, that you all lost a long time ago, that's all. Maybe after we're done, you can learn how to make it again. Fove said it so sincerely, and her voice was so sweet that it was hard to doubt she meant it. Usagi doubts a thing like that, Usagi answered. What can I say to you? I live in this place, where the flying things come from. You can start with your age. I'm turning 15, next season. Fove corrected herself before she said, months. Usagi is the same age. Usagi smiled when she said that. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen her make. Why did Fove not come here herself? I wanted to, but Mom said it was dangerous, Fove complained. Rebecca, to her credit, seemed to have decided that expecting her daughter to stay silent the whole trip was a bit much, and when she saw that Usagi actually smiled, her gaunt face lighting up on meeting someone her own age, Rebecca let it pass. Your mother tells you truth. Chikagawa is dangerous. All Chikagawa-reya is dangerous. I'm only girl my age in the long steps. The others, they are young, or gone to wed another tribe, or died. Many died, Usagi said matter-of-factly. With no one to keep safe, Usagi would not last in the time between past as child and future as adult. Fove is lucky. Fove gets to make friends with Usagi. That means Fove is very lucky, Fove said cheerily, and Usagi smiled a little more. I would like that. Usagi has no friends left, all gone too far above or below the ground to speak. It would be good to have another, Usagi replied, and reached up to pat the machine just above the lens. Maybe after we're done here you could come stay at my house, at least for a while, Fove suggested, and I could see Rebecca's conflicted face. She wanted so badly to help the rabbity girl, but was aware of the difficulty. Here is a sad truth of human life. Resilient as humans are, the scars of their lives never truly vanish. If you beat a child, the bruises heal, but the memory of the beating and the way it changes their brains lingers on. Neural development is strongly tied to their treatment. The victims template their behavior and become, in time, victimizers. And the scourge of suffering takes a special kind of will to break free of, to keep from perpetuating the cycle onto the next generation. Usagi did seem like a sweet girl, but she survived in a horrific existence on the edge of death. She lived in fear of the normal world outside of her own, and was used to being largely uncared for and independent. It would be a struggle of great magnitude for her to readjust, all while also being so vastly different from other humans that she might as well be an alien herself. The difficulty of providing for her needs must have been weighing on Rebecca. Fove seems kind like her mother, but Usagi has these. She reached up and caressed the length of her ears. She is not fully beast, nor fully man. She will surely be killed. Chicago was famed for its violence toward those deemed less than human, and after the Great Dying, more died to humans all over again, and some say those were slow and painful. If Usagi is going to die, she prefers it to be quick. The creatures here are not cruel, and she would barely feel a thing. There? Usagi fears a slow end, Usagi replied and shook her head. Her long gray ears bounced around her head. The world isn't how it used to be. Look at Bailey and Bao and Boatson and Bonnie Red. They're aliens, not even part human, and they're accepted. Things aren't like they used to be, and Usagi is so kawaii, I'll bet everybody will adore her at once. Nobody will want to let a bunny girl go hungry, Fove said, and Usagi cocked her head. Kawaii? Usagi has not heard this word since father. She said, how does Fove know it? It comes from Japan, just like your name. A long time ago, a whole bunch of things from there got really popular here, and a few words creeped into the language and became English. Kawaii, Sasuga, Neko, Chan, San, Usagi, Ayaname, and a handful of others. Fove explained and then said, Usagi is very kawaii. Usagi reached up and pulled down her ears while she walked. Is that true? Is there nothing for Usagi or the long steps to fear out there anymore? Fove was hesitant. She knew all too well that not everything was perfect. It is a lot less scary than here. You'll get good food and a bed every day, and you get to learn things, and you don't have to be afraid all the time. This cannot be so. A bed every day? How do you carry it? Usagi asked, and Fove's drone shook back and forth as if she was shaking her head no. We live in one place. In buildings like these, she panned around to the offices and shops, but smaller. I have my own room that I should probably leave more often. I have the same bed that I sleep in every night, and we eat 3 times or more per day. 3 times per day! Usagi shouted in utter disbelief. Her belly rumbled, and Bosuin handed her a piece of jerked meat. The rabbity girl began salivating, and her eyes glassed over at the very thought. She stuffed the jerky in her mouth and began chewing, tears of happiness streaming down her face. Usagi has never eaten 3 times in one day. That's not counting second breakfast or mild snacking on Tolkien's Day. Fove explained. Then we have like 5 meals, but that's only on the 3rd of January. Usagi took that in. If we do not die, if you can help us, we can all live like that? If we leave Chicago area? I can't promise it'll be like that right away, but it'll be possible. A lot of work maybe, and I'll do what I can to help. I promise, Fove said, earnestly bobbing the drone up and down. Usagi would like that. Food enough for a full belly, a safe sleep in a warm place. Those are Usagi's dreams, she said, her ears twitching, and she stared eagerly into the camera lens. Girl Fove on other side of Macha-in. You really want to be Usagi's friend? To help Usagi and everyone in Chicago area? Yes, Fove said with a finality that echoed her mother's character. If Mom and Dad are okay with it, maybe you could even stay with us, meet with some of our important leaders, our managers, and explain how to help you all the most. Usagi's ears twitched. Fove is kind to her friend, but Fove's mother is Fove's. Fove's father is Fove's. Usagi has no mother. Usagi has no father. No adult will want to take in Usagi. A growing girl needs too much food. No one will give that to her from the mouth of their own child. But it is a very nice thought, Usagi said, and patted the machine again, as if she were patting Fove's own head. Enough talk for now. We must be quiet. Sometimes rats come up at the center places of the stone paths. We should not disturb them, even with your strength to keep us safe. Usagi said, and turned her attention away from the drone. She drew her crowbar, ready to fight if she had to, and began to creep past a gaping hole in the center of the street. Chapter 29. Rats get big. That was my first takeaway from what happened next. When Usagi drew her crowbar, I already had a good indication that she was expecting a problem. I had this confirmed for me when I heard her whisper under her breath, "Shouting was stupid." I had little confidence in myself if it came to anything other than handling greasy neckbeards. But a few rats? I thought that couldn't be that bad. The skittering beneath the streets as we moved past the gaping hole in what was once a busy intersection was loud enough that even the humans could hear it. The little feet slapping on stone tunnels was like some form of twisted applause, and in the corner of an old drain, I saw countless little shining eyes watching, staring. And then they began to move. "Go!" Usagi shouted, and we raced over the open ground. She might not have been well fed, but pumped with a recent meal and adrenaline, she knew how to move, pointing straight ahead toward double doors which sat closed and, surprisingly intact, she ran ahead, arms and legs pumping, ears flying behind her in the wind. She had reason to run. We all did. Out of the sewer streamed scores of rats, each one the size of small dogs. They were thick-bodied with dark brown fur and smelled like the sewers in which they lived. They had long buck teeth that rose and fell with every chittering noise, and their little hairless tails danced behind them as they ran over the road. It is a credit to the military forces of our peoples that Bosun, Byron, and Bonnie Red spun to meet the threat, while I, Rebecca, and Usagi raced ahead. I could see now why Bonnie chose to leave her medic with the ship. The danger was at our heels, squealing for our flesh. I dropped to all fours and raced ahead. Reaching the door first, I yanked it open and held it for Rebecca, Bao, and Usagi. Fove's drone was catching it all. I knew she had to have muted the audio, but I will never not be impressed by the fact that she made sure to catch everything. Bosun and Bonnie Red used their hand claws to rip great swaths around them, while Byron used a large and vicious-looking knife, fighting in a kind of triangle formation. They kept backing away as the swarm of rats poured out of the sewer. I had never smelled so much blood in one place. Little screams like tiny people added to the horror. The rats, it seemed, did not know quite what to make of Dlamacons, but they did not like our jaws. A Dlamacon's bite can shatter bone with ease, and our metal teeth seemed to have caught the eyes of the rats. Byron kept the count of the pace. Back, 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 back. Just repeating the phrase, and they stepped together as if they'd fought 1,000 battles. It reminded me very much of the coordination of volleyball, the way they worked in pairs or between rival squads in short-lived alliances to disrupt the return of a ball by a well-performing team. Fove's drone caught it all, and as rats slipped around the trio to come for us, Usagi stepped in and began to swing her crowbar. The heavy thud was joined by the crunching noise of rat skulls. She moved with surprising quickness, but I could smell her fear. I and Bao did our best to help her, fighting our own little triangle until Usagi flung her crowbar over her head and forced the rats to jump out of the way. It created a moment of peace and bought time for the trio of soldiers, who promptly turned and sprinted toward the door right after the three of us. Fove's drone hovered outside as the rats crashed against the surface. Made of thick ironwood, I could see why it lasted so long. As the rats screamed their frustration and scratched in futility against the surface, we took a breath. Fove's audio came back on. I'll let you guys know if anything funny happens or when the rats go away. Man, I've never said this before, but I'm glad I listened to Mom. I turned to look at Rebecca. She was hunched over, her hands on her knees, breathing hard. But even she managed to smile at her daughter's words. The drone zipped away from the door to hover over the rats, and we were alone. Forgive Usagi. Shouting was foolish. You were all placed in danger. She bowed her head and closed her eyes tight like she was bracing herself, but Byron waved her apology off. Meh, spot of fun as an exterminator, don't worry about it, everybody's fine so there's no problem, he said. Usagi remained braced for a moment before she slowly opened her eyes. Aye, lass, a little bored in action is to be expected on a thin like this. Don't worry about it, Bonnie Red emphasized and looked around the room. Instead, you could do worse than to say sorry for not making this more neighborly. It's a right mess, she emphasized, and she wasn't wrong. The big open area must have once been a lobby. Semicircle-shaped wooden desk sat off to one side that could have sat 12 people, but there were only 3 chairs for occupants. Dust and gashes competed for ownership over the wood, and the rest of the place was no better. One whole section of ceiling above was caved in. Old tiles of some kind of cardboard or foam were scattered and broken. Bits of a plastic-looking stuff, fragments of wood and splintered furniture were everywhere. An old computer device looked remarkably similar to the ones in our early history. Interestingly, because humans are such profoundly good pattern seekers, This similarity led some to speculate about past contact between our species and theirs, but I can say definitively that this is false. My species was far, far too busy at the time when humans were developing those systems, and we had not yet met humans in person. The simple truth is far more dull. When faced with similar problems, engineers from multiple species simply tend to come up with similar solutions. Much for the same reason our most ancient of ancient surviving constructions are also pyramids. Because if you want a big thing to not fall down, that is the best shape. With a wide base and narrow top, you get a great deal of stability. So it was also with computing systems. But back to the matter at hand. My hearts were racing, and I was heartily relieved. Bao immediately went to Usagi and put her hands on the girl's shoulders. Don't risk yourself like that, Usagi. You're just a child. Let the grown-ups handle this kind of thing. That is how it is handled, Usagi remarked. But she smiled up at Bao, clearly pleased. And Usagi did well, didn't she? Yes, you did. But you mustn't worry me like that, Bao replied. What is this place? Rebecca asked as she looked around. The noise of the scratching rats was diminishing, and with their loss of interest, or interest in the corpses of their fellows at least, she was able to relax. A search again place. You want to see moss we eat. Moss grows here in places. It is why we meet here. All the places of searching again grow the moss for some reason, Usagi said, and while I, Bao, Boatson, and Byron were thoroughly confused, Rebecca turned pale. She ran her hand through her ink-dark hair and rubbed against her scalp. Nobody move. Give me a moment, Rebecca said, and yanked her little backpack off and slapped it down to the ground. She yanked the black zipper up and over and plunged her hand into its depths, rummaging around until she brought up a small rectangle, which she immediately flipped on. A steady clicking flared up. Son of a bitch, Rebecca whispered. What? The rest of us asked all at once. Rebecca didn't look up from her device while she rattled out an answer. The way she said it. Search again place, the word research, is a combination of and search, where is Latin for again. So search again. And what they were researching here was radioactive material. There's uranium here, and lots of it. But the strange thing is what? I asked, giving voice to the thoughts of everyone else. The levels are a lot lower than they should be, Rebecca explained, and Bao chimed in. Like the decay rate is being artificially increased? She suggested, and Rebecca nodded. Exactly. Rebecca's reply was twinged with curiosity, though she hadn't looked up from her device while she waited for the source to be traced. We do that on Delamius to control the radiation dosage on our subjects. Hawk's gene replication opened up a lot of viable options for everything from segmentation in body plans up to and including advances in clonal tech. So this must have been an early attempt at doing the same thing here, but then, who? Rebecca's question died on her lips as she recalled what Usagi said earlier about things humans did in the Chicago area. Wow, Rebecca said and whistled. No wonder this place got blown to hell. Bao seemed to have picked up on her meaning. At least ours are brain-dead. She shivered. Poor humans. Usagi seemed utterly lost at the nature of the conversation, and for that I was grateful, but the others were not, and it was a grim-faced group that waited for the drone to return and catch up with us. I was glad that Fauve hadn't been witness to that realization. Perhaps it's silly, but for all her hardy nature, she was fairly innocent in many ways. I guess I wanted to see her stay that way for a little while longer before she grew up. Bao seemed to share those thoughts about Usagi, and chose not to explain to the floppy-eared girl, instead choosing to address Rebecca and ask, Can you tell where it is? Probably, but I have a better question, Rebecca said, and finally looked up from the little screen. Where is this moss your people eat? Is that really what we should be worrying about? And are you safe? Usagi is resistant, and so are the rest of us since our fields prepare us to deal with possible radiation exposure. I felt silly asking, but I couldn't imagine returning Rebecca to William with a cancer diagnosis looming. Even if they could treat that sort of thing now, it wasn't a pleasant thought. I'm fine, don't worry about it. My office on campus is near the nuclear engineering department. Thanks to safety regulations, we all get the good preventative buildup injections just to be safe. Unless I swallow some polonium, I'll be all right, Rebecca said, and then gestured toward the rear door. Now, Usagi, lead the way. She invited and shut down any further discussion, just as Fauve's drone zoomed in through the hole up above us. Rats are gone. You're safe! But wow! You were all amazing! Not to make it sound like a game, but you were so cool the way you showed those rats who was boss. That was fire-hot awesomeness, she exclaimed, and I could practically feel her fangirling all the way back in her room. Of more interest than fangirling was what Rebecca said. I had the distinct feeling that there were things that Fove's mother wasn't telling us about her work. But there was neither the time to question it, nor a reason to do so right just then. Usagi responded to Rebecca's instruction and led us through a set of steel doors that were still secured after centuries, and into a dim corridor that was lit at all only because there were holes in walls and ceilings that coincided with other holes in walls and ceilings that let in light from outside. It was a dim trek through dusty sunbeams which did not improve when she guided us down a set of stairs. Rebecca flicked on her flashlight, and Fove's drone flashlight came on as well when the beams of light decreased in number and size, eventually becoming nothing. The white lights bobbed with the drone and footsteps, and I confess, it was an eerie feeling being down there. Occasionally we met the dead, just skeletal remnants really, jaws hanging open in the light, and occasionally toppling when our collective steps or a foot placed in the wrong spot caused the leaning to finally fall. Usagi avoided them all, and after several minutes walking we could hear a faint trickling noise. Water? I asked. They probably were doing some mini-reactor experiments here too. Who knows? A long time ago, weapons development was all over the place. Humans were always really good at killing humans, Rebecca said with the kind of academic casualness of people for whom knowledge was an abstract thing. This is something I am familiar with. But having experienced human warmth, thinking of so much of it just snuffed out? No, it wasn't just academic to me anymore. The memory of the lethal injury to little Harry was still fresh in my mind. How much fear and horror they went through in the end. That Rebecca could be so icily calm and abstract, even though it was about an event so long before. There is a lesson here. Human culture has shifted to care more broadly about others than just their own inner circle. But human nature is not, as near as I can tell, vastly different than ever it was. And humans evolved living in small family groupings and tribes. The other can be considered as little more than a hypothetical, if they are so inclined. That is the dark side of even the finest of humans. If Rebecca could be that way, who could not be? All that was set aside, though, when we rounded a corner and found ourselves greeted by a sapphire blue pulsing light coming from just beneath a closed set of double doors.